Hey everybody, welcome to PC Perspective. I'm Ryan Schrout. Today, we're going to do a quick preview of an enormous product. This is actually a case sitting on the table next to me. This is the EVGA DG-8 series of cases. We happen to have the DG-87, which is their flagship model. The sticker price on this is $229 MSRP. They're running a special for pre-orders that makes it $179 essentially. There are going to be several different models, the 86, 85, 84. That have different levels of features in terms of how integrated the fan controller is, if they're external buttons or you have to use software only. But we wanted to, we just got this case in, and I wanted to do a quick walkthrough of the chassis and kind of what the capabilities and features are of it before we do our full review, because it's going to take quite a bit more time. And I know that since seeing this at Computex last CES, it's been a while that it's been under development, so I wanted to make sure we had an early look for you guys to enjoy. So let's switch it up and take a look. So here it is. You can tell based on the proximity of said case to me that the DG-87 is an enormous product, right? So we're gonna do a quick walk around here. And again, this is not a full review. We're basically just kind of giving you an overview now that we have an almost completely finished production model here. So there are a couple of things we need to know. First of all, this is the way the case is meant to face you. Normally, the skinny side would be the front, and then this would be the left panel and then the back panel, whatever you want to call it. For this case, for the EVGA cases, the DG-87 is, this is the front, this is the left, and this is the right. So that's how they kind of reference everything in terms of where things are, where they're locating items, et cetera, et cetera. So let's start with the front here, since this is where we're looking at. So this is where all your components will go. You can see it's got a huge window. It is plastic. It's not glass or anything like that on the front. You simply open it by hitting that button, and the door swings right open. Now it doesn't have a huge angle with which to, it doesn't really go past that. If you want to remove the door, it's actually really simple to do. There's actually a button here that you kind of like a safety mechanism, and then you push down and you actually lower the hinges out and the door comes off just like that. And it's a fairly reasonable weight on the door itself. Now you can see the entirety of the inside as well. It's kind of divided up in two compartments. You've got your lower compartment down here where your power supply and your hard drives will go. This is also where you have fan controllers and stuff we'll talk about in a second. Huge room for motherboards here, lots of graphics cards. You could do 4-way SLI if that was a thing anymore, I guess. This EVGA piece of plastic is actually illuminated from the side with LEDs that lights up the EVGA logo, and it gives a really cool look. It's basically useful to kind of block cable clutter on this side of the window, and it's actually a really good idea. If you don't like it, or if you are trying to show things off, you can actually take it out like that. There's a simple thumb screw that I did drop down inside the case. I'll have to remember to get out here in a second. And then you get basically better access, or basically a better view of the rest of the inside of the chassis. Huge CPU bracket opening. We've got all our cables here for USB headers, motherboard headers, USB 3, USB 3.1 Type-C. All that stuff is included in here. Now, a couple of things worth pointing out in here. This bracket here is removable through a thumb screw as well. It's useful to feed cables through. There's some openings on the side, and there are cable grommets behind it, which you'll be able to see when we open up the back. This is also a place for you to mount a reservoir. It comes with some brackets that screw into these three locations. You can mount a reservoir for water cooling. Obviously, EVGA built this case. It's got a ton of room for water cooling, or if you just want to stick with the air cooling, you can do that too. There's room for two 420 millimeter radiators, 360 mil. You've got three case fans up front. You've got one pre-installed here, but there's room for two more, and then there's some more on the left-hand side as well. Other interesting things on the front. Up top, it's all ventilated across the top here. You have a power button, you have a reset button, and two USB 2.0 ports up here, as well as a K button, which we'll discuss in a second. But a lot of that functionality is duplicated down here. Here's your power button, your reset button, and your K boost button. You have two USB 3.0, your audio jacks. You have an HDMI output and a USB Type-C connection. Type-C connection is great to see on this case, and the HDMI connection is really useful if you happen to get into VR headsets. You want to connect and easily disconnect your Oculus Rift or HTC Vive. They provide the capability to do that. Now the K-Boost button, both up here and up top, actually enables the K-Boost feature, which let me reference these notes over here. Essentially, it allows you to, it does two things. It boost your CPU clock and your GPU clock all the way up. It does this by changing the Windows profile to high performance. That affects the CPU. And then using the EVGA Precision software, which obviously you'd have to have installed to do this, it will boost the GPU clocks all the way up on EVGA graphics cards, kind of artificially telling the GPU that it's always fully loaded. And then obviously, you know, you'll have maximum performance there, but you will also have maximum heat and noise and all that type of stuff. So something to keep in mind. Also right here, which we'll show you, is a built-in fan controller. This is the one with the display and the dedicated buttons here is only on the DG-87, the higher end model of this case. And you can hit this button and switch between controlling intake fan speed based on percentage, exhaust fan speed, or you can view the internal temperature through a dedicated temperature probe that they include here. So that you can basically put this anywhere you want. If you're more concerned about motherboards, processors, video cards, you can kind of place it wherever is most interesting to you. And it will show a little display down there with basically a 3-digit kind of number there. Now, that's actually pretty impressive. There's also, I should note, the DG-Tune software, which is a separate component. Obviously you install on Windows, that allows you to control the fan speeds in Windows without having to use these dedicated buttons. And there are some models that have a fan controller but don't have dedicated buttons, and that's the only way you'd be able to control it. Airflow in the case is pretty simple. Cold air comes in through the right side, and then hot air exhausts out the left and out the top. And that's, you know, pretty much how it's designed to work. If you want to move fans around, I guess you could, but that's where they're at here. In terms of fan intakes and filters and stuff, it's actually kind of nice. We'll go ahead and start our rotation, and excuse me as I have to step in front of the camera to move this beast. It does weigh 51 pounds, by the way, so that is worth keeping in mind if you're going to put it somewhere where maybe a 50-pound device is not the best idea. On the front, let's get this back just a little bit. You can see there's no optical bays at all in the chassis. The EVGA logo does light up. There's room for airflow underneath. This front part just kind of snaps out, and in it you have a removable fan filter. You can actually just vacuum it inside here, but it does come out if you want to remove it that way. But for me, it's probably easier to just vacuum it while it stays inside the device. And you can see you've got 3 140 mil fans pre-installed, and you can obviously convert that into water cooling if you'd like to do that. It's pretty simple. The build quality here, it's not perfect yet. This is kind of a pre-production final model. It's not, they said there's gonna be some tweaks, like the power button feels a little squishy, a little clicky on the corners. I'd like to see that improved. But overall, that's pretty good. And there's also a fan filter out the back we'll show you underneath the power supply as I rotate. And I said back, but I actually meant left. So again, terminology coming back to get me. So here, if we look at the left side, you can see it actually has its own button as well, and it actually opens up this rear hatch. There are 240 millimeter exhaust fans pre-installed. Your power supply connection goes through here. You actually just snap in and remove this kind of decorative plastic plate. 4 screws removes this section. You pull it out, mount the power supply to it, and you can slide it back in. And then here is that other fan filter as well. Now, what's kind of interesting about this is where your motherboard kind of connections all go to, right? So if you can see there, it's a little bit harder in the light, but you can see this is where all of your PCI Express cable or cards would exhaust out. So you've got your connections, your display connections, any external devices you have here. You've got your HDMI cable here that leads to the front for your HDMI extension. A couple of neat things about what is done back here. There is a sliding area here that you can open or close to varying degrees that basically allow you to create extra ventilation for GPUs. So if EVGA recommends, for example, if you have a single GPU that is not a blower style cooler, that you open this up and it will allow cool air to kind of come in through this area directly to the GPU cooler right here and then exhaust inside the case through the normal methods. If you're running multiple GPUs or blower style coolers and they're close together, what you want to do is you want to close this off so you get all of the airflow coming from the front of the case through the back into the fans on the back of those blower style coolers. So it's an interesting little add-on there. Now obviously you're going to have your USB cords, your any headsets or keyboards or mice and display connections coming through here. And there's actually a grommeted opening right here that comes out the back. And so what that allows you to do is, once you get all those cables fed through, you can close that door and you get a really, really nice, clean finish to it. You will still have the power supply cable, which is a little bit disappointing. I was kind of hoping they'd figure out a way to let the internal power cable kind of come up through here and then out that same grommet. There are, usually those cables aren't very long, so that might have been a complication they had to deal with. But it's still pretty good, right? So all of your USB cables, your connection cables, will all come out the back, which I will rotate to here. So now here you can see where that cable grommet actually is. Now this door is steel, and I will say it's a little bit, like in this one corner, it's a little bit clicky, so hopefully that's something that isn't seen in the actual final production models. It's also a very heavy door. No kind of sound insulation or anything like that, but it's dense for sure. It's one of the heavier case doors I've ever had to deal with. Now in the back, you get all kinds of interesting stuff. You can see the TV logo through there. But what we're looking at here is tons of cable grommeting for you to pass cables through, and a lot of stuff that they've already passed cables through for their own use. For example, you've got your front 3 fans that go into the fan controller here, but if you want to replace them with something else, you can do that. We've got our temperature monitor, we've got all the other connections up front. What's interesting is how much storage support they've built into this. This actually will support 12 drives, 1, 2, 3, 4 SSDs, 4 dedicated 2.5-inch drive bays that are toolless. Then you have 2 toolless 2.5-inch drive bays, or I'm sorry, 3.5-inch full-size hard drive right here. Their plastic's kind of flexible. And then you have 6 more bays down here that can be used for 3.5-inch drives, 2.5-inch drives with external screws or adapters, whatever it is you want to do. And they're actually accessed in an interesting way. This door slides up and releases all these trays. Now these trays are not toolless trays, they're metal. You will have to actually put screws in them into the side, but it offers a lot of interesting flexibility, right? So we can take 2 of them out and leave the 3rd one in and then lock it in place, or you could leave all 3 of them in there. They actually have mounting holes they indicate 2.5-inch drives. They even have some listed here as for pumps. So if you wanted to leave this drive bay in, but install a pump on it, you can actually do that. And or if, let me reach over here and get these screws undone. These drive bays do come out, both of them. So if you have a lot of water cooling gear, or you just don't need that many hard drives, and so you would rather save that space either for, these are not exactly coming out as easy as I would like, you could remove them, but they actually also have a grommeted opening on the top of them if you do, decide to install it into or install a pump or similar device onto it. And you could also even use those for like SATA cables, I guess, as I was looking through it a little bit earlier, trying to figure out exactly what it was for. So this just slides out like that, and you can see there's a grommeted opening on top that you could pass SATA cables through to go directly to the motherboard if you wanted to, or you could actually install, like we were talking about, a pump of some kind to it. So that's where we're at. We got all of our accessories and stuff down here. It is an enormous case. There is a ton of functionality here. I think the built-in water cooling capabilities, the built-in fan controller capabilities really make it stand out. It's a unique design as well, and it's kind of meant to shift how people look at cases, right? Like, this is supposed to be the side that's facing you all the time, not the front where we used to, sized around optical cables, or optical drives rather. There's some other neat things in here that are a little bit harder to see from this particular angle. This is where your hard drive would install. They actually have a slide out tray that can just be used to hide all the cable clutter, which is a good idea if you just want things that look nice. You don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it. And like we said, they had the EVGA LED bracket there for if you want to hide stuff on that side. I'm pretty impressed with the case just in kind of a first glance. It's going to be really big for a lot of people. But if the price is right and the performance ends up being as impressive as the features and capabilities, I think a lot of people are going to like it. So there you have it. That is the EVGA DG-87 chassis, available, I believe, this month, maybe in early August. $229 MSRP, $179 for pre-order on EVGA.com. If you want an enormous chassis that has some pretty cool features, and also kind of you buy the components and you're proud of it and you want to face it and look at it, and you also have the desk space for it or the table space for it, I think it's a pretty good design. We're obviously going to run it through the rest of our testing and build a system in it and go through all that process to see what other things we might find in terms of performance or capabilities. But early look is pretty impressive from EVGA. So make sure you check PCPro.com for more news on it, and when the review actually goes live, we'll let you know. Thanks, guys. If you enjoyed this content, consider supporting in-depth technical content by contributing at patreon.com/PCPer.